1597. The Myeongnyang Strait of Joseon. A mere 12 ships faced a Japanese fleet of more than 130. By all common sense, the battle was already over. But Joseon was the kingdom that ruled the Korean peninsula, where South Korea stands today. And at the very moment that kingdom seemed on the verge of collapse, one admiral returned to the sea. How was this possible? How could so few ships stop such a massive invasion fleet? This is not just the story of a naval battle. This is the story of Myeongnyang, one of the most unbelievable victories in history. On April 13, 1592, Japanese invasion forces crossed the sea and landed in Korea. The kingdom they invaded was Joseon, the last dynastic kingdom to rule the Korean peninsula. The war would later be known as the Imjin War. From the very beginning, the invasion was devastating. Japanese armies advanced north at shocking speed. In just over 20 days, they captured Hansong, present-day Seoul. Joseon had been caught unprepared. In those first terrible weeks, the war did not look like a contest. It looked like a collapse. But there was one man who prevented that collapse from becoming total. His name was Yi Sun-sin. He was not merely another general. He was Joseon's greatest naval commander, the supreme admiral of Korea's southern fleets. From the summer of 1592 onward, Yi Sun-sin struck at Japan's supply lines. He seized control of the southern sea, and he prevented a kingdom that was already losing on land from being destroyed altogether. He was the man who had held the southern sea together in 1592. And yet, just before Myeongnyang, that same man was in disgrace. He was not standing on the deck of a victorious fleet. He was sitting in prison. In early 1597, as a second Japanese invasion approached, Japanese deception combined with suspicion inside the Korean court. Yi was given an order he believed was reckless. He refused to obey it. For that, he was dismissed, arrested, tortured, and nearly executed. Then he was stripped of command and reduced to the rank of an ordinary soldier. So the man who would command at Myeongnyang was not a hero rising smoothly from triumph to triumph. He was Korea's greatest admiral, broken by his own government, cast down, and then summoned back only when disaster left Joseon no other choice. That disaster came on July 16, 1597. At the Battle of Chilcholyang, the Korean Navy was shattered. Won-gyun, the admiral who had replaced Yi Sun-sin, was crushed by the Japanese fleet and killed in the fighting. Before Yi's removal, the Joseon Navy had still possessed around 130 warships and more than 13,000 men. After Chilcholyang, almost all of it was gone. Only a little over a dozen ships survived. They were withdrawn by Bae Sol, a regional naval commander. The men were scattered. The organization was broken. The confidence was gone. It seemed as if Joseon's navy had simply ceased to exist. When Yi Sun-sin heard the news, he wrote a single line in his war diary, the Nanjong Ilgi. "I could not stop myself from weeping aloud." It is a short line, but it carries immense weight. This was the grief of a man watching the navy he had built over years collapse in a single blow. And the Nanjong Ilgi would preserve, in painful detail, the desperate days between Chilcholyang and Myeongnyang. But Yi did not surrender to grief. On July 22, 1597, the court reinstated him as the three provinces' naval commander, the supreme commander of Joseon's southern fleets. But reinstatement did not mean recovery. What Yi received back was not a navy, it was a ruin. When he arrived at Suncheon on August 8th, only 60 men gathered around him. The next day at Bosong, there were 120. In practical terms, he had just 12 surviving warships. That was all. Joseon's sea power had almost vanished, and the man called back to save it was being asked to rebuild it from almost nothing. At that very moment, some within the Korean government argued that the navy should simply be abandoned. The fleet was too weak, they said. The ships too few. The danger too great. Joseon should give up the sea and concentrate everything on defending the land. Yi Sun-sin understood what that would mean. It would not save the kingdom. It would destroy it faster. So he sent a memorial to the throne, and in that memorial, he he wrote one of the most famous lines in Korean history. "Your servant still has 12 warships fit for battle. If we fight to the death, we can still hold the enemy off. As long as I still live, the enemy will not dare despise us." This was not mere defiance. It was strategic clarity. Yi knew that Japan's invasion was not simply a war on land. Troops, grain, weapons, reinforcements, withdrawals, redeployments, all of it depended on sea control. If Joseon lost the sea completely, then Chungcheong, Cholla, and eventually the rest of the country would be exposed again. So he was not merely trying to preserve 12 ships. He was trying to preserve the last artery keeping the kingdom alive. He could not win with numbers, so he would win with position. He needed a stretch of water where Japanese numerical superiority could be broken apart. On August 19, 1597, at Hworyongpo, Yi took command of the surviving ships from Bay Seoul. On August 20th, he moved to Imjin. On August 24th, to Ioranpo. On August 26th, reports arrived that the Japanese fleet had already approached near Imjin. Then, at dawn on August 28th, 8 Japanese warships appeared near Ioranpo. Yi personally led the pursuit in his flagship. It was his first clash with the Japanese Navy after returning to command. He could not yet risk a full-scale battle, but he showed one thing clearly. He would not run, and he would not surrender the sea without a fight. On August 29th, he moved into Byeokpajin on Jindo Island. From there, until the eve of Myeongnyang, the remnants of the Joseon Navy prepared for a final stand. But even to call it preparation almost sounds too orderly. The men were afraid. They had seen the destruction at Chilcholyang. They knew how few ships remained. Strong winds complicated movement. Supplies were limited. Confidence was shattered. And on September 2nd, Bay Seoul deserted. The fleet was not only weak in numbers, its spirit was close to collapse. Yi rebuilt that spirit piece by piece. On August 25th, he executed a man who had spread false reports and shaken morale. Discipline had to be restored. On the night of September 7th, he anticipated a possible Japanese night attack and made the fleet ready. When his men hesitated, Yi personally drove his own ship forward to meet the danger. He showed them, again and again, that their commander would stand at the very front. On September 9th, during the Double Ninth Festival, he slaughtered 5 cattle brought from Jeju and fed the men. It was a practical act, but it was also symbolic, a way of telling them that they were not abandoned yet. Myeongnyang was not a miracle that suddenly appeared on one dramatic morning. It was built out of discipline, fear, hunger, resolve, and leadership under extreme pressure. Then Yi chose the battlefield, or rather, the water. The Myeongnyang Strait lay between Jindo and Haenam. Locally, it was known as Uldolmok, the Roaring Channel. It was a narrow strait, about 2 kilometers long. At its narrowest point, only around 300 meters wide. Its currents could reach 11.5 knots. The water surged and collided so violently that the very sound of it gave the place its name. Yi knew this sea. In open water, the Japanese fleet would have every advantage: more ships, more mobility, more room to surround and overwhelm. But here, in the confined throat of the strait, the very size of the Japanese fleet could become a burden. If the leading ships were delayed, the ships behind them would be trapped. If the current changed, order could become confusion. If ships collided, numbers could work against themselves. If 12 ships were ever to face hundreds, this was the kind of place where it had to happen. On September 14th, 1597, new intelligence arrived. Of the more than 200 Japanese ships operating in the area, 55 had already reached waters near Ioranpo. The Japanese were boasting that once the Joseon fleet was destroyed, they would advance straight towards Seoul. To the Japanese commanders, this no longer looked like a campaign against a functioning navy. It looked like the final destruction of wreckage. They expected panic. They expected flight. They expected the remains of the Joseon fleet to break at first contact. What they did not expect was to be forced into the narrowest and most violent water of the campaign by a commander who understood exactly what that water could do. Yi reacted immediately. He ordered refugee boats gathered near the Jola naval base to move ashore. On September 15th, he shifted his formation from Byeokpajin to waters west of the Myeongnyang Strait, in front of the Jola Right naval headquarters. That day, before the battle, he gathered his commanders, and he addressed them. As the military classics say, those who are resolved to die shall live, and those who seek to live shall die. If one man guards a narrow pass, he can make 1,000 fear him. That is our situation now. He also warned them that any violation of orders would be punished without mercy. This was not theatrical rhetoric. It was brutal realism. Yi understood that if his men fought merely to survive, they would be destroyed. Only by standing firm, as though death had already been accepted, could they hope to live. Then came the morning of September 16th, 1597. Japanese warships began moving through the Myeongnyang Strait. They were advancing toward the Joseon position off the Jola naval base. The Battle of Myeongnyang had begun. By the day of the battle, Yi Sun-sin had 13 warships and 32 scout boats. In reality, only the 13 warships mattered in a major naval fight. But Myeongnyang entered Korean memory as the Battle of 12 Ships, because Yi's most famous memorial had been written when only 12 warships were still counted as fit for battle. That is why both numbers appear in the story. One belongs to the desperate days before the battle. The other belongs to the line that fought on the day itself. Behind them were over 100 refugee and fishing boats. These were not combat vessels. They were there as visual deception, to make the Korean force appear larger than it really was. The Japanese, by contrast, had somewhere between 200 and 300 ships in the wider operation. But the strait prevented them from bringing all of them in at once. So they kept their heavier main force farther back. Instead, they pushed medium and smaller ships into the channel first. Roughly 133 vessels formed the forward striking force. At the opening of the battle, the current favored the Japanese. Their lead ships were driven forward fast. Even the ships themselves reflected two very different ways of fighting. The main Joseon warship was the Panoxion, a large, sturdy vessel with a high fighting deck, built to carry heavy cannon, built to strike from range. The Japanese relied heavily on the Sekibune, lighter, faster warships, ideal for rushing in, carrying soldiers close, firing arquebuses and arrows, and then boarding with swords and spears. In simple terms, Joseon was strongest when it could keep the enemy at a distance and smash them with cannon fire. Japan was strongest when it could close quickly, grapple, board, and turn the battle into close combat. On open water, the speed and numbers of the Sekibune could have been decisive. At Myeongnyang, in the narrow throat of the strait, that tactical advantage began to fail. And this is where the true drama of the battle begins. As the Japanese fleet surged forward in layers, the Joseon sailors were afraid. Korean records say that when Japanese ships surrounded Yi Sun-sin's flagship and close fighting began, the other Joseon warships held back. They hesitated. They feared what was coming. The trauma of Chilcheolyang had not disappeared. The enemy in front of them was overwhelming, and more enemy ships were still pressing in behind. So in the opening phase of the battle, the Korean line was not solid. The numbers were hopeless. The morale was fragile. And in the center of it all, Yi Sun-sin's flagship absorbed the attack almost alone. That is why Myeongnyang still sounds unbelievable. The strait was narrow. Japanese ships pressed in from multiple directions. The enemy concentrated on the Korean command ship. And at first, almost the only vessel that truly stepped forward was Yi's own flagship. The Japanese wanted to close in, board, overwhelm, end the fight hand to hand. Yi answered with cannon, with arrows, with shot. He had to keep them at a distance. That was the essential struggle in the opening minutes of Myeongnyang. Joseon had to hold the enemy off. Japan had to get aboard. And in those first moments, the other Korean ships still had not fully committed themselves. History remembers Myeongnyang as the Battle of 12 Ships. But in its opening phase, it was, in a very real sense, the battle in which one ship held. Yi Sun-sin did not break. He shouted to his men, "However many enemy ships there may be, they cannot simply overrun our ships. Do not let your hearts waver. "Fire with all your strength." This was not merely encouragement. Yi could see fear hardening into paralysis. He knew that if this continued, the battle would collapse before it had truly begun. So he did not command from safety. He placed his flagship in the most dangerous position, and he endured there. The first turning point at Myeongnyang was not the tide. It was the fact that Yi Sun-sin did not break first. Then, slowly, the battle began to change. Korean records say that once Yi drove forward and held his ground, the other Joseon ships began to follow. One by one, the vessels that had hung back in fear moved into the fight. This may be the most human moment in the entire story. Not everyone was heroic from the start. They were frightened. Some probably wanted to flee. But when they saw their commander standing alone and refusing to yield, they found the courage to return. So the victory at Myeongnyang was not the victory of a fleet that had never lost heart. It was the victory of a fleet that found its nerve again at the edge of destruction. Then came the second turning point. The current changed. According to Korean records, as the Japanese vanguard moved deeper through the strait, the tide reversed. A current that had driven them forward now began to work against them. The Joseon ships could move with the new flow. The Japanese ships had to fight against it. That difference was deadly. In the narrow channel, Japanese numerical superiority became a liability. If the leading Sekibune was hit and knocked offline, the ships behind it were immediately thrown into confusion. If ships touched, they tangled. If they tangled, they blocked one another. The strait ceased to be a route of advance. It became a trap. The Joseon Panoxion now rode the current and poured cannon fire and arrows into the congested Japanese front. From their higher decks, they hammered ships crowded into the waterway. The Japanese Navy was strongest at close range. But at Myeongnyang, its formations began to break apart before that close combat could be properly achieved. A Sekibune forced sideways by the current could collide with another. A collision could disrupt the line. The disrupted line could become a mass of trapped ships. And once that happened, Joseon's cannon fire did the rest. Korean historical records say that 31 ships in the Japanese vanguard were destroyed or sunk. The following vessels collided with one another. The entire formation fell into disorder. This was not simply a matter of sinking enemy ships. It was the moment when the Japanese realized that numbers alone would not save them. At first, fear had ruled the Joseon fleet. Now fear began to spread through the Japanese one. By evening, the Japanese withdrew. The Joseon Navy had not lost a single ship. Japan retreated in shock. And Myeongnyang was not simply a dramatic victory won in a single day. It changed the direction of the war. With this battle, Joseon regained control of the sea off the Jeolla coast. Japan's strategy of using combined pressure from land and sea was badly disrupted. A navy that had stood at the edge of annihilation survived. More than that, it now possessed the foundation from which it could rebuild. This is why Myeongnyang must never be remembered as a number alone. Yes, it is famous as the battle in which 12 ships faced more than 130 enemy vessels. But behind that famous number stands a much heavier chain of events. The invasion of April 13, 1592. Yi Sun-sin's dismissal and arrest in early 1597. The catastrophe at Chilcholyong on July 16, 1597. His restoration to command on July 22nd. His address to his officers on September 15th. And then, on September 16, 1597, Myeongnyang itself. Only when you see that chain clearly do you understand why the battle sounds like legend. It was not merely the triumph of a brilliant admiral. It was the moment when a country believed to be finished stood up again at the very last possible moment. Yi Sun-sin's story did not end at Myeongnyang. He rebuilt Korean naval power, continued to strike Japanese movement by sea, and in November 1598 was killed at Noryang while pursuing the retreating enemy in the war's final great naval battle. But by then, his name had already entered history. Later naval writers, from George Alexander Ballard to the U.S. Naval Institute, would rank him among the greatest admirals of all time. Even today, Britannica describes him as the Korean admiral and national hero who played a decisive role in repelling the Japanese invasions. So Myeongnyang was not merely a Korean legend. It was a naval victory the wider world eventually recognized for what it was: an extraordinary battle in a narrow strait that helped save a nation. On September 16, 1597, what Joseon preserved at Myeongnyang was not merely a channel of water. It preserved proof that Korea was not finished yet. After the disaster at Chilcholyang, Japan believed Joseon's sea power had been erased. Even the Korean court considered abandoning the navy altogether, retreating inland and yielding the sea. But Yi Sun-sin understood the truth. If the sea collapsed, the country would collapse with it. So he took hold of the last warships he had left, and of the fiercest water he could find. By all normal logic, it was a battle he should have lost. But history has days that do not end the way logic says they should. Days that sound invented. Days that sound too dramatic to be true, and yet were real. Myeongnyang was one of those days.